CJ Peterson, and welcome to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. Today, my guest is Rashod Coleman, and we titled his podcast, Fatherless Son, Journey from Growing Up Fatherless to Being a Father to Many. Thank you for coming on today, Rashod.
Thank you, CJ. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. You had a rough upbringing. Would you please share with a little bit of your story with us?
Sure. I was born in 1983, Wilmington, Delaware. I was the youngest of three boys. My mother Linda and my father Daniel. At the age of 3 years old, my father was arrested for kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, a bunch of different charges. On February 21st, 1987.
Gotcha.
Subsequently, he went to court, fought trial, and received 2 life sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a lot of inner city kids, I was forced to grow up without a father. In that time, my mother did all she could, working 2 or 3 jobs, just trying to make sure the family is sticking together and always, doing the right thing. And one thing that she always taught me was that your father may not be here, but you can look at other mentors in the neighborhood that you might be able to take some of their values, some of the things that you like about them. So
right.
in the 7th grade, I hooked up with a guy. His name is Coach George. He was my first football coach, and he taught me how to harness a lot of that anxiety and a lot of those things that I was missing from a father, and move it on to the football field for something positive.
Right. I mean, I would imagine there's a little bit of anger in there too for not having it around.
Yeah. So my friend, it's weird now that I'm looking back on it. There was a lot inside of me, but at the time I didn't know it. So him being such a great mentor and coaching a lot of kids that were growing up without fathers, he was able to get a lot of good recruits because he was there to challenge us. He was there to give us some kind of structure, that structure you need in order to continue to prevail in life and be a good individual for the environment that you're growing up in, which was a rough environment.
Yeah, bless his heart for reaching out to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. And he eventually passed me off to a guy named Cordy Greenlee, who's one of my mentors in high school,
mm-hmm.
who took me in. And in the 10th grade, he began talking to me about college. And I kind of thought he was kind of, a little over his head talking about college.
You're like, really, me? No.
Where I come from, college is not the place we usually go to. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids that come from that neighborhood, they get involved in crime and, drugs or guns and things of that sort. And so that's kind of, we just accepted it as being our fate. After you're done with sports, you'll head back to the street corner. And for him, planting that seed in my head that I was not only good enough athletically, but I had the mind to be able to go on a collegiate level and be able to get a degree, kind of sparked something in me to where I started separating myself from some of those negative things that the streets had to offer. Mm-hmm. And I eventually graduated from Delaware State University with a bachelor's in communications, and met my wife, who's Caucasian, who's a white woman. And throughout those years, I eventually figured out why my father was arrested, and the person that he was accused of, the person who was accused of kidnapping that night was a white woman. So there was some tension there for the decisions that I was deciding to make with my wife and a couple of things surrounding that. But everybody, came together at the end of the day. And then I became a police officer. So my mother, we didn't have the best relationship with law enforcement. So I think she was kind of just like, oh man, first you go on this route and now you're going this route. But I always felt like, even in looking at today's society, you have a lot of tension between inner city individuals, inner city people, and law enforcement. And I feel like if there's gonna be a problem, there also has to be a solution. So somebody has to put their best foot forward and step into those places of employment in order to either help change them or help the community to understand what their mentality is.
Now, were you a police officer in the community that you were growing up in?
No, so I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, but I was a police officer in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Can we back up just a little bit?
Sure.
You touched on a couple different areas that I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper on. Mentoring, mm-hmm. the two men that mentored you and took you under their wing.
Mm-hmm.
Usually growing up I've grown up all over. I was an Army brat, so I moved all over.
Yeah.
But you tend to follow those in your group. How did you break free of that chain that would continuously pull most people back?
I think just the plants that the seeds that they planted in my head was for that I was a little better than that fate. So for them to say, Rashod, you can go to college. Your grades might not be the best. Your mother might not have the most money. You might not come from the best environment, but there are other people there that come from the same environment that you come from. You just have never heard of them before.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this step. Let's see what happens. And also had a great guy. I want to make sure I shout him out. Was Coach Ryan. He was my defensive back coach.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that he did for me in the 10th grade is I was taking a lot of the lower level classes, and he moved me up to the collegiate level classes in high school so that I would be able to have my records show that I'm ready for college. You know, it was a struggle academically, but he got me the help, and I had mentors and things of that sort that would be able to help me. But I think that to answer your question, I think a lot of it is on environment. You know, and the things that you see in environment. Surely there were people that came from that environment that have been to college and have been successful, but it just wasn't what I was seeing on a regular basis. So when they were able to show me that I think that's what helped me more than anything.
What was it like for stepping onto the college campus for you? I can't imagine if it was something you never even dreamed of, and then next thing you know, you're standing on a college campus looking around. What was going through your mind?
Well, it was my first time away from my mother, which was strange because ever since my father had been locked up when I was young, that was our first time being separate from each other. So she started crying, of course, when she's moved me into the dorm room. But it was just one thing I can remember her saying to me is, "It's time for you to grow your wings now. It's time for me to stop taking care of you. It's time for you to take care of yourself. And if things go wrong and you can't, for some reason, you can't handle it, you can always come back home." And that was those were some of the best words I've ever had from her, was to go around, travel the world, do what you want to do in life. If anything ever goes wrong, you can always come back home, regroup, and then we can start over again.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're in college and you're doing your thing and you're happy-go-lucky, and then you meet this lady that probably just knocked you off your feet.
Yeah. So me and her actually met after college when we both taught. She was a geometry teacher in high school, and I was a business teacher at the same high school that I went to. So we were teaching at the same time. Yeah. At first, we got into an argument. Was our first time conversing with each other about a kid in her class. And it's interesting. The argument that we were having was because he was doing a lot of things. He was doing a lot of things in her class and being disruptive, and she was kind of done with them. And the kid reminded me of myself. I was kind of that class clown, but I didn't take it too far. I didn't want to get kicked out of class. Right. I didn't want you to call my mother. So my plea to her was just, continue to work with them. And it was like I was fighting for myself. Continue to work with them. Continue to give them chances. And she said, "No, I have 19 other kids. I can't continue to spend a half hour dealing with him. Other kids aren't getting what they need." So needless to say, we didn't come out of that conversation being very fond of each other, but she swept me off my feet later on, and it's been good ever since.
So you went to college for being a teacher?
No, I actually went to college for communications.
Okay.
Went to college for
So how
communications.
did you make the leap from communications to teacher and then teacher to police officer? That's some massive leaps.
Right. So my undergrad was in business. So when I got to the high school, I was teaching business at that point. And I had a football coach at high school that was a police officer. Mm-hmm. And he had always kind of talked to me, "Oh, we need kids like you that are police officers." I kind of blew it off. But in my interactions with police, I would always see the influence that they would have on people, how when they would talk, people would listen. Mm-hmm. And I figured if I can get in a position like that and talk to where these younger people that grew up the same way I grew up will listen to me about going to school, about doing the right thing, about staying out of trouble, then I figured that would be a good thing, and that'd be a good way for me to give back to communities that are in the same position as my community was in.
Okay, so let's jump forward to the police officer role now. Sure. Now you're in a position to help other teens and people in general. So how did you go about doing that? Because I know maybe not then, but now I know police are in a massive struggle right now.
Yeah, which is what I love. People say I'm crazy when I say that, but when there's trouble, people that are there will rise to the occasion. People that are there will figure out solutions. One thing my college coach used to always tell us is, never bring me a problem, just bring me a solution. So one thing that I started in Philadelphia was I would go into the schools inside of our district, and I would teach a math class inside of uniform, and that
Oh,
would be that would be the first time that a lot of these inner city kids had ever spoken with a police officer. And some of their questions, they gave the most interesting questions ever. How can I become a police officer?
mhm.
What do I need to do? What's the physical capabilities that I need to have?
Well,
Um,
plus in doing that way, you were fostering trust.
exactly. So then when I see him on the street, I would have to arrest someone that they knew. They knew I wasn't there just terrorizing the neighborhood. They
Mhm.
knew I was a person that I had spoken with them, early on, that cares about them being in a good environment. And sometimes that good environment means that someone needs to go to jail and be rehabilitated. And sometimes it means that I need to stop, on a street corner and talk to a kid and see what ways I can help them.
Mhm. So, in fostering trust with them, you also help build a bridge between other officers and these kids. Because I know in some neighborhoods, if a crime happens, they're not going to say anything because there's fear of not only themselves but for their family.
Exactly, and that's a problem that I think also me being in law enforcement that we can help out with. We always want to help, or we always want that information from the public to be able to solve these crimes, but we also have to be able to protect those people that are willing to inform us about the crimes that are going on. I had a quick story. I had an incident in Philadelphia, which was a triple shooting, where two people died. The one person that me and my partner rushed to the hospital, she was pregnant. She was shot in the stomach. So we get her to the hospital. About 3 hours later, we have to go back on the street, and the detective says that people are calling in saying that the person that did the shooting is still out there. He has these clothes on. He's sitting on this corner, and my thing was, well, let's go get him. And the detective's explanation was, if nobody wants to tell on him, you can't go there and violate his rights. You have to have something substantial that
Concrete.
says, yeah. So, I can
Not
only
an
imagine.
anonymous tip.
Yeah, exactly. So, situations like that is crazy because you want to reach out and help out in that situation and tell somebody, hey, look, come on, you have to say something. But on the flip side of it, I'm going back to my home when I'm done the shift, and they have to be in that neighborhood. So,
Right. And you went from Delaware, you said,
yes, correct.
to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a huge city to
It
be
is.
a police officer in. So, how did you make that transition?
Well, the neighborhood that I had grew up in was it's only a half hour from Philadelphia, and so my neighborhood was big in crime, big in drugs, big in guns, and all those things. It was not as big as Philadelphia was, but it was for lack of better terms, it was a smooth transition for me because it was kind of like I was back home. When I was tell kids get off the street corner, I can remember being that kid on the street corner with the police officer telling me get off the corner. But the difference was I try my best to stop and talk to the kid why he has to get off the street corner. There's a lot of drug activity here. We had a shooting here last week. All those things tie to you trying to educate the public on why you need to do something. And I think that's something that law enforcement needs to do a little more is educate the public on exactly what we're doing and why we're doing
Mhm. Well, I know you don't like to brag, so I'm going to tattle on you a little bit. You got a few awards. Would you mind sharing what those are?
Sure, I got the Philadelphia Heroism Award, which was a big fire, and me and my partner and another gentleman, we were able to get everyone out of the house, the whole family out the house before the house burned down.
Mhm.
Several awards for drug confiscations and gun confiscation or for illegal firearms inside of Philadelphia's districts, and they were all good, and I enjoyed, getting that recognition. But it's always been my thing to see how I can help. As I said before, some people are going to have to go to jail. People have been going to jail and going for rehabilitation for a long time. But I think it's more important for us to figure out a way. I don't want to say not to lock them up, but for us to figure out why people are continually being locked up. What can we do inside of that environment to help that?
Well, and part of it is as soon as they get out, they go right back to the same environment. So they're almost fighting
Exactly.
a losing battle
Yeah.
because they're jumping right back in.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need to be put somewhere else and start over, which is hard for them.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I mean, I know, I know you say you traveled a lot and you've been to a lot of different places, and that's been the one thing that's been huge for me, was to first go to college and get out of my environment.
Mhm.
Once I got out of my environment and I seen that there are African American people that have 4.0s, it just blew my mind that you could get straight A's and look like me. And my thing was, well, why can't I do that? This guy, he grew up without a father too. He grew up without a mother and a father, and yet he's still successful. So, like you said, the same thing. I think when people do go to be rehabilitated, give them some tools, have them take a trade, give them some education. But the biggest thing is you have to get out of that environment. You have
That
to get out of
you
that
have to
environment.
instill the confidence in them because like you mentioned, going to college, you're like, well, how can I get this? But then you saw somebody else doing it
Hmm.
who was like you, and you're like, oh, hey, wait a minute, I can do that. Part of
Yeah,
that is, your endurance, your stamina, your confidence in yourself, and
hmm,
knowing that, what, I made it out.
yeah, exactly,
Not only did I make it out, but I made it out successful, which you have done
exactly,
in
exactly. And
spades.
I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I'm in a position now with a beautiful wife and three young kids that I can take care of them and give them everything that I always wanted in life. Sometimes I spoil them too much, but
You can, but you can't. I mean,
yeah,
you're gonna give them limits because you know where you came from. You know
yeah,
what you came out of, and
exactly.
you know what the ugly side looks like. So I'm sure you share some of those stories with your kids so they're aware that, what, you actually have it really good. This is what I had.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
Even with
that walking, it's not that walking
mhm.
3 feet of snow to school both ways. Your grandpa told you. This is the
10 miles.
reality of life, and you can actually take
Exactly.
them down to a portion of the city and say, look, it doesn't matter what color people are.
Hmm.
It's what's inside of them that
Yeah.
makes them who they are.
So true. So true. So
And
true. And I still struggle with that. I mean, my son, he's 4 years old, and he doesn't like being in a room by himself. And sometimes my wife wants to, she go back into your room. But when I was 4 years old, I can remember feeling like that. I can remember saying to myself, "Oh man, I wish I could sleep in my mom's room." So I would let him in. I would let him in the bed. Go ahead, sleep down there, sleep down bottom. So
just sleep
so
on the
yeah,
floor. It's okay.
yeah, for sure,
Well, they're
definitely.
so cute at 4 too. You kind of can't tell them no.
Yeah, I know. I'm bad with that. I'm working on it.
Well, you have a book coming out either very soon or right after this airs, or like
Sure.
right before or right after this airs, because we're going to be airing it November 3rd. Um,
Right.
can you tell us about the book?
Sure. So the book is called Fatherless Son, How the Criminal Justice System Tore My Family Apart and Brought Us Back Together. And it has it has that title because I walk readers through a life of, making some making some good decisions that you've heard, and then making some poor decisions also in life. And I think a lot of that was a result of not having that traditional family dynamic. So when I became a police officer, my father, at the same time, my father had gotten released from prison, and we began looking into his case, and we found that there was, DNA evidence and witnesses and all these things that were never called to court, and that more than likely he's innocent of the crime that he spent more than 28 years in jail for. So
Oh, wow. So,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to jump back again.
sure.
How was your relationship with your dad, with him being in jail for most of your life? And then when he got out, you're a police officer? I can't
Yeah,
imagine what that was like. Just take a
ironically,
short trip of that.
I feel like he took it a lot better than I would have got that information. I went to see him a couple times when I was young, but we didn't have a very good relationship coming up because I really didn't know who he was because he went to jail when I was so young. But I think the first time we really had an adult conversation, I brought my wife to see him, and she's white, and you've heard what the things that he's been through, but he was just so generous. He was so courteous, and I even spoke to him about us getting married and the whole racial thing, and he said, "No, if you're in love, man, nothing's going to keep you guys apart." And I couldn't believe he was coming from. And I'm like, "Oh man, my father is like the best. He's the best guy in the world. He's going through all this. He's on lockdown. He's serving a life sentence, and yet he just wants his son to be happy. He just wants his youngest son to be happy." And as far as the law enforcement part, when I had talked to him about that, he said, "I know you're a good kid. If you weren't a good kid and you were not on the right track, then I would say you probably shouldn't do something like that. But I know if you're in that position, then what happened to me probably wouldn't have happened if I would have had an officer like you. So
Oh,
that meant a
that's
lot
very
to us.
cool.
Yeah. So
That probably touched you really well.
it did.
So when is this book getting launched?
Book is getting launched November 1st.
Okay.
It'll also be available on audiobook, which I'm working to distribute right now.
Okay.
You can find this book at arthurrashod.com. That's AUTHORRASHOD. Also have a Facebook group called Arthur Rashod Coleman Support Group for Children of Incarcerated Parents. And I also have a YouTube page called Road to Exoneration, where I break down my father's case and I look at exactly how I was able to find the information that he basically hasn't seen in 30 years. Mm-hmm. So at this point, he's out. He's doing better. He's in that same environment which we've spoken of, but he has taken some culinary arts classes, and his mind is focused on just doing the right thing and exonerating himself.
I'm going to jump back real quick. I keep jumping all over the place. Sorry, my mind's a little scattered today. The Facebook page. We titled this "Being a Father to Many." Is that part of how you're reaching out to teens that are in the same position you were in growing up? Is through that Facebook page?
Yeah, that's a part of it. I do a lot of my writing on there because, as I said earlier on, I was never strong in the grammar aspect and the writing aspect of education. And recently, within the last couple of years, I've kind of just started taking a lot of thoughts in my head and putting it down. And it's amazing how therapeutic it is to just write down a situation or maybe I'm going through something with my children or something with my wife or something in the past that's bothering me. Once I write it down, that weight just comes off of me. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's amazing. So, so the Facebook page is really used for me not only reaching out to people that may have grown up the way that I grew up, but also for other people to be able to reach out to that kid that may be a fatherless son or a fatherless daughter that may be going through something, to reach out to them and try to give them whatever support that they need.
I really like that because that may put somebody in the same area as a teen that you're not in.
Exactly. Which is crucial.
Yeah, I love that. Congratulations. You've done an amazing job from where you were to where you are. And I congratulate you. Thank you for coming on today. We have about 3 minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to add?
So you can follow the page. You can go on, and I think this will air November 3rd. So the book should be out by then. Mm-hmm. But the biggest, if I had to sum the book up in a couple words, it's a manuscript for people. It's a manuscript and a guide for people to know what children are going through that are growing up without a father.
That's important because not everybody understands the mental process.
The dynamic.
Their dad is gone or their mom is gone.
Right. Exactly. And one thing I go through is, unfortunately, when I was 12 years old, I lost my virginity. And, I made those decisions because it was the streets that was raising me. My mother had 2 or 3 jobs. It was only the fellas around, some of which were older. So at that point, I wish somebody would have been there to say, hey, you don't need to be making these kind of decisions right now. So if somebody can read this, and you may have a 12, 13, or 14-year-old that you may be able to talk to and say, hey, why don't we hold off? You'll have plenty of time for that later on in life. Let's focus. Let's put our energy to, in this direction. Mm-hmm. So, things like that are some of the things that I talk about inside of the book that would be able to help people.
And I love that because you not only talk the talk, but you actually walk the walk. You put it into practical ways of helping other people. And so, again, I do congratulate you. And I thank you for coming on today. And I thank you for sharing your heart. You've been a real joy. I know this is a re-recording for those who aren't aware. We had to redo it because it was a little bit off. But either way, you've been an amazing person to talk to. And I really appreciate your time. And
thank you so much.
You sharing your heart. For those who want to learn more about Rashod Coleman, you can find him at author Rashod, AUTHORRASHOD.com. His book came out on November 1st. This is airing November 3rd. So make sure to go and check that book out. He said is it going to be an ebook as well?
Yes, it'll be in print. It'll be print on Amazon, ebook, and it'll be available for audio.
All 3 of them will be available on the 1st?
All 3 of them be available. Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Awesome. So check it out. There's no excuse because we have all avenues covered. Um, and again, thank you for coming on today, Rashod. And thank you guys for listening to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. I'm CJ Peterson of cjpetersonwrites.com. Until next time.